Hey, I just want to shoot a real quick video with one of the most typical questions that I get that I think a lot of people don't really know, and that is, what are a seller's closing costs? So this is going to be very specific to Indiana and northern Indiana. Each geographic area kind of has its own procedures and typical costs and the way they're split. Each state definitely is going to change due to the laws. But that being said, you basically have three different areas. Number one is the commission. That's the big one, clearly. Those programs will range from 3% to 8%. Most people are going to fall in either side of 6% number. Everything's negotiable. That's typically for the full service, typical service. You're going to be right around that plus or minus 6 number. That's the big one. Number two is taxes. Now, in Indiana, we always pay taxes in arrears, which means for the prior year. So when you pay your tax bill that comes due in November, it's actually for the previous half, the second half of the previous year. So give or take, pretty much whenever you close, you're going to have about 1 year's worth of taxes that you're going to need to bring current. In general terms, in Indiana, we know 1 year's taxes, if it's your primary residence, is going to be about 1% of the assessed value. And the assessed value is kind of the government's appraisal, what they think the property is worth. It's never perfect, but usually it's fairly close. That's if it's your primary residence. Now, if it's an investment property, you're going to be taxed at 2% of that assessed value. And those taxes are capped thanks to Mitch Daniels. He did that a few years ago. And commercial properties are 3%. But for us, you're looking at about 1% typically. And then lastly is closing costs. Now, closing costs are kind of a generic term. I refer to them, they're kind of like ingredients, if you've heard this analogy before. The ingredients for pizza are different than ingredients for a ham sandwich, but they're both kind of labeled as ingredients. When it comes to closing costs, a seller has their own closing costs, a buyer has theirs too, but they're different, but they're lumped together. So for a seller, your closing costs are going to be the cost to have the deed prepared. Usually they're talking $50 to $100. The title insurance, there's an insurance policy, and that's going to range based on the actual amount being covered, which is going to be the sales price of the house. There's going to be some recording fees down at the courthouse, and in our area it's pretty typical for the buyer to request a survey, for the seller to provide a survey. So everything's negotiable, but usually for a subdivided neighborhood you're looking at maybe $400. So to break this down on a very generic percentage basis, let's just use number 6%, for instance, on the commission. Number two is you're going to have about 1% of the value of the property for taxes, and then these numbers put together are going to be about 1 to 1.25%. Now, a deed, a survey, recording fees are set costs. So on a percentage basis, on a $100,000 house, they're going to be a higher percent than they would be on a $400,000 house. But 6 plus 1 plus 1, we'll call it, is usually pretty typical. These are generic terms. If you'd like me to send you a net sheet that breaks these down very specifically to the dollar, I'd be more than happy to do that, or forward this to anybody you know that might be interested in knowing exactly what those closing costs are. I'm never too busy for referrals. Thank you.